Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Hi there.
Hey, what are we talking about?
I would like to talk today about something I hear people talk about in the year of opening all the time. This comes up a lot. How do I get my needs met? Like what? And it comes up in all phases of opening up.
Oof,
Um,
it does.
right. So this is a good topic.
This is a great topic, and I think you're onto something. So I hear people talk about getting their needs met. It's actually something that I start hearing often when somebody is interacting with me, like on social media, just they're popping into my DMs to ask a question, or we're in a connect call because they're thinking about joining the year of opening, but they're not sure. I start hearing from people that what either like, hey, you know what? I realize that I can't get all my needs met in my current situation, so thinking about opening up as a way to do that. But I also hear about how just because we open up doesn't mean we get any better at figuring out how to get our needs met. It does not automatically happen. If you were struggling before, this will not automatically result in knowing how or even being able to identify what your
That's
needs
it.
are.
I've been open for a really long time, and I'm starting to maybe get a handle on the beginnings of how to identify my needs well enough to then communicate them well enough to maybe figuring out how to get them met. So it's not simple. It's not like, oh, I'll just put myself out there and my needs will magically get met. Didn't
Yeah.
work.
Well, let's start at the top then. I mean, the number one hindrance for any of us getting our needs met is identifying what our needs are. And let's maybe broaden this. It's not just about needs. Like needs, from my perspective, are they're fairly high level. They're fairly vague. They can be met in multiple ways. So you can have needs and you can have wants, and your wants are these more specific ways that you want your needs to be met. Right. So that's how I differentiate between a need and a want. So if I have a need, say, to feel my partner is supportive of me, well, how that I might have a whole bunch of wants
Yeah, I
around
see.
how that might look, how I might feel that, how I might receive
Okay.
that feeling. But identifying needs is tricky. And the more I work with this, the more I become aware that we all need so much. We all have a lot of really core needs for
Yeah.
connection, for love, for so much I barely even know how to talk about it without being so generalist that it feels like it loses a bit of meaning.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we go? So needs, very vague. So how do
So I
we
think of needs as vague because I'm thinking about, I have a need for safety. I have a need for
Yeah,
trust. I have a need to feel valued. I have a need to feel a level of protected
yeah.
or yeah. See,
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like, well, I need food, but I want a pizza. Could be
yeah.
any number of things,
Now I
but
want a pizza,
now I
by
wanna
the
yeah, I
way.
shouldn't have said that.
Okay, but also, okay, let's actually back out a little bit further even because
Alright.
something that's come up recently, there's somebody in a cohort who graduated very recently, and there was something that she pointed out. She struggled a lot. This person came in very willing and excited even to learn about opening up, but not knowing how to identify any needs. And in fact, in early weeks was very like, ooh, I didn't know, but I don't actually believe I get to have needs. Like there seems to be a
Mhm.
core theme in here of like, no, 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 we don't have needs. We meet other people's needs. So over the course of the year, something that stood out to me is she started identifying her likes. Like there's another piece to this puzzle because we have needs and we have wants that are the way that we want our needs to be met. But
Yeah.
just being able to identify what you like and then be able to name what it is you like about that, that's a really powerful tool. It's a really powerful tool to go from, "This is what I like." Okay, now I can identify what I like, and now here's what I like about that. Because so often I see people struggling with the vocabulary to actually describe what they mean, and then their partners wind up feeling overwhelmed or just like, I can't, how do I meet that need? How do I help you feel safe if you can't
Oh,
tell me what that looks like? Or how
okay.
do
That
I
right. That I totally like, okay, how I would like to feel safe. I wouldn't know where to begin. I mean, I would start be with what helps me feel safe, and I'd be try to start giving you that might have nothing to do with how you feel safe.
Right.
So how do we close that gap?
Well, I was reading an article actually just this week. It was from a writer I really, really respect, quite a bit. I've been reading Dan Shipper's writing. He has a podcast called "How Do You Use Chat GPT?" I happen to like tech shows, and he also does a bunch of writing. And he was talking about, oh gosh, like learning to name what you like about something by really getting close to the sensory experience of it. I'm
Hmm,
gonna the I, I'll put a link to the
okay.
essay in the show notes, but it was really cool because he was talking about how um he was, in the dark, unbottling spices and smelling them and then trying to identify what the smell was. So this is like he didn't know, but he's uncapped something and he smells it and he's like, chili powder. And then he caps it again and he looks, oh, it was actually cumin. And he started putting, and the interesting thing about this article was I had never heard this before, but like the olfactory bulb, the bundle of nerves that
Yeah.
are the olfactory bulb, they don't have language. Like that's not what they're for. They're for this recognition that happens on a visceral sense. So putting language to these scents like totally opens up your sensory vocabulary. So this is what people are doing when they're smelling wine or tasting something and they're talking about all the notes. They've learned to put words to what they like about the thing. And I loved this article because it seemed so applicable to relationships. He wasn't talking about relationships at all, but if
Okay. So you so if I'm understanding you, I would um it I could refine my understanding of my likes by paying attention to like my the way my body takes in the experience.
well,
Something like
yeah, I
that?
mean, more attention, but also putting words to it.
And
Quite
putting
literally
words
putting
to it.
words to it, and
Okay.
this is something you and I could work
Oh,
on a lot more. I mean, we do work on it, but
wow.
I I make meaning by applying words as much
Yeah.
as I can. Like that is a primary tool that I use. But you have often really embraced being in the moment and being
Oh,
in the
in the
sensation.
early days of our relationship, you were like, "Hey, how are you gonna? You're not. How are you going to talk to me about this? I got no words for this."
Well,
And early, I was like, "No, I'm not going to use words for these things." Which the thing about that is, it is a very isolating maneuver, because if I can't share with you using words, I'm alone in it.
right, and that was how I experienced it. Was
Yeah.
I was trying to relate to you, and let's make this real practical. We were just talking about how we wanted to be touched. So we had
Right.
started having sex,
Yep.
and it was very clear to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were both enjoying it quite a lot.
We were. That
I was
my
enjoying it.
my impression of you, yeah, I
I
certainly
thought you
was.
were
Yes, and
enjoying it.
it seemed to me that you were.
And it's it was so challenging for me to figure out how though to dial it in because I was very aware that
Yeah.
we were new to each other. We didn't know each other's bodies, and it seemed like there was well, all of the people I had had sex with up until you, there was a blockage around using words to describe what you wanted, to actually give me a really a rich description of suck harder here, lick here gently. Like I'm getting really, really practical. Like I wasn't looking for fancy words, but clarity around, well, how does that feel? Do you like that? And you were struggling. I remember it being this enormous
Yep.
struggle that, I mean, there is still a struggle to this day at times to describe anything more than, I think you said to me last night, you said, what you're doing right now feels really, really good. And I remember feeling that when I was first learning to touch myself. And I didn't know what was going to happen exactly, but I knew that my cock wanted something and it felt very intense, but I didn't know exactly what was gonna happen, and
I'm listening to you say this. I'm like, you gonna get to a point soon? Like
okay,
there
you
isn't actually no, what I mean to
there's
say
a
is
lot of
all of those words that I used didn't actually communicate to you anything that you could really take in.
well, I have learned to translate
Well,
that.
yeah, but that's a lot of work to ask you to
Well,
do.
so I've learned to translate that because I know that you struggle to actually name the sensation, and we've talked about this quite a bit
Yeah.
around, you're like, "I don't know. I don't know what it is about what you're doing that feels good right now."
Oh, this is great. This is a today I learned kind of thing. Like I hear you talking about this and all right. So the more vocabulary I have to describe what not just what's good and bad about my experience, but how it got there. Like what are the things? What exactly were you doing with your tongue right then?
Right.
And I remember, like, early on when you were like, "Tell me." I'm like, "I can't tell." Like, that's good, and I can't seem to get the resolution of sensory processing to say, "Oh, okay, you're doing this with your tongue. Do that. Keep doing this thing." It would just be, "Og like that good. Og like that. Please do more."
Well, that is actually exactly where we started,
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm
and
not overstating it.
we did start calling you Og for a while
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
talked about how there seems to be a lack of granularity, which is so interesting to me because you are so much more in your body than I tend to be, like, on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute experience. It y You're so much more present, but
But
yeah,
I'm
there
so
was
much more present that I don't talk about it.
and
I
and
don't
And you never
make up the
seemed
words
to,
for it.
yeah, make up the words. That's actually the key. Make up the words.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually matter what words you use. So you started using a word, that did work for me. You would just say, "What you're doing." That phrase right there would
Yeah.
clue me in to start looking. Eh, so I would start identifying like, "Oh, what I'm doing right now," and I just by tone of voice, it didn't even really matter exactly what you said after that. By tone of voice, I could tell whether it was a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and if it was neutral, you probably weren't saying anything at all.
Right.
And this is part of the beauty of having a relationship with more than one individual is I get to have a relationship with you where I experience you sharing as best you can, like, what you like about this, and then I have sex with other people and they talk about their bodies and what they're experiencing, what they like differently, right? They have a different vocabulary
And so yeah, so we started talking about needs and now we're into wants
and
and
likes.
likes
So I went
and
to
the vocabulary to communicate them, to
well,
identify for myself and then communicate.
because the thing I see missing most frequently is what's the vocabulary for this? I started giving people a
Hmm.
list, a literal list of here are some attachment needs that you might have. Put these in priority order. Dave Cooley was on the show and he talked
Right.
about
Yeah.
exactly that. Put those in order. What are your top priorities for attachment needs in this context, in this relationship? And that helps because when I just say to people like, "So what do you need?" The number of people who have been able to just state what they need very low, and especially if not given some priming ideas of like, well, what can I say about what I need? And this gets us into big trouble because then we're in a relationship and we say we want to get our needs met. And Instagram has told us all now that we should get our needs met in our relationships, which is like, cool. Well, what does that mean? If you don't even know what your needs are
Mhm.
or how to name them, and if you can't put vocabulary to them, then how are they going to get met? And
Yeah.
even more interestingly, how will you even know?
And
Will
r
you know when
how
they're
you
met?
right,
And because it winds up being this ineffable thing. Like, I'll just know because I'll feel good.
and here's the thing that, like, yes, I definitely spent a lot of time relating like that. I'm not, and, to some extent, it was consensual in early relationships where, yeah, we just didn't talk about it, and so, um yep, we're not going to talk about our needs. So we're just going to detect them. And you just said, when I feel good. Yeah, that's one way. You know what the other way of determining a need is? When you start to feel resentment when you don't get it.
Yeah.
That's a dicey game to play, to use resentment as the tool to figure out what you need out of your relationship. It's kind of a destructive,
It's
uh, problematic approach to it.
well, because often what happens is we start manipulating each other
Hmm.
then. Because
Yeah.
also, if I can't name it,
You name it.
well, I may unconsciously, like
Hmm.
not in a conscious, I am going to manipulate this person into meeting my needs in a way that is unconscious and not clearly thought out, but changes the circumstance so that I will get my need met. So
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
going back to our sex life. Welcome back.
No, come back. There we go.
um, so you couldn't describe what you liked about getting a blowjob early on,
Yeah.
and you couldn't use the word blowjob. Or is that
That's
2
true.
words? I suppose that's 2 words. You couldn't use that phrase.
I'm not sure. Would you capitalize the B and the J? I don't know.
So we were hurting for lack of vocabulary. You were
Yep.
struggling with words, with putting words to it. I mean, for the longest time, interacting sexually was more you would use like the words fooling around, and that's about as far as we could go.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out what to do with that because I didn't want to manipulate you, but if I could go back and tell that girl, and call her a girl because she was not acting like a woman much of the time. I would tell her that what he's doing right now is manipulative, but it is not intentionally harmful. And so
Hmm.
somebody's going to have to break this cycle. Somebody's going to have to break this pattern. And I think I did get it, but it took me like 5 years to really get through to you
Well,
what the
yeah. I
problem
mean,
was.
you started working on it fairly quickly.
Well, I started
Um,
trying to get you to talk to me.
to get yep,
I'd
and
already been married to somebody who didn't wanna talk in bed. I didn't wanna repeat that with any partners. Um,
which good job counteracting, working against the shame that I brought into my sexual relationship. Um, and which is one of the reasons I wouldn't say any of the words. All my own stuff.
right,
And you were like, "Hey, let's talk about it." I'm like, "That's a thing we can do?"
and
Okay.
anything we need, anything we want, anything we like can be tied up to shame,
Yeah.
tied
Right.
tightly to shame. And in fact, I think for most of us they are, because most of us have some hangups around being either too much, too needy, not good enough, not enough to deserve this. Like there's a million different like core beliefs we can have kicking around in there
Yeah.
again unconsciously. We're not thinking to ourselves like, yeah, I'm a piece of crap and I don't deserve anything. No, it's our unconscious
Yeah, it's
stuff. And I noticed that you started manipulating me to get me to provide to you what you actually wanted. So you didn't know how to describe what you wanted from a blowjob. I was asking you to. I was
yeah.
inviting
Yeah.
you to help me understand how exactly you liked this cuz I've had plenty of penises in my mouth. They all want something different. There's a pattern, but like there's uniqueness. What trying to figure that out without you telling me was not ideal, but then I started noticing that you were telling me. you just wouldn't use words.
Hmm.
You were angling your body in certain ways. You were, touching
Yeah.
my body in certain ways.
Yeah.
There were a million different subtle cues.
That's a lot of work to do. That's a lot
It
of work to
is,
ask you to do.
and it was worth it, and the thing is, I'm sure that I did the same in
So,
other areas.
oh, okay. So, as humans, our communication runs on multiple levels all the
Right,
time. There's
right.
verbal, there's facial expressions, there's physical cues of various kinds. And when we get into um, the physically interacting, directly physically interacting, like with sex, now we have um, another communication pipeline. And I just used that one instead of one that can be much more effective and efficient
And less coercive,
and less
'cause
coercive
because
because
there's the
because you
problem.
can't consent
I can't consent
to the
to.
things that I do to
Mhm.
try to manipulate you because you have to interpret what I'm doing, and that may not even be accurate. So, yeah.
And in the scenario we were in back then, I felt empowered to question and push you only up to a certain degree. We had a massive power imbalance. We've talked about that on the show before. The power imbalance was really, really severe. And so I didn't feel the way I do. Like now, when somebody won't communicate with me, it's not a problem that I'm unwilling to solve right then. In other words, I'm not going to engage with someone sexually or even in a friendship, like in a platonic exchange, if I sense that they are trying to get me to meet their needs without talking about them. And some of that's just my own trauma recovery. I'm doing my work and saying, "Hey, that's not gonna work for me anymore. I'm not willing to do that. I wanna actually actively negotiate about our needs, wants, desires, all that."
Okay. This is wow. This is awesome. So, getting our needs met means yes, in investigating ourselves to find out what our needs and wants and likes are. And yeah, I love the list of needs. A good list is a good starting point rather
Sure.
than just trying to imagine it up out of nowhere. Um, and we can do the same thing with wants
We can.
and likes. I mean, there's the yes no list. It's nice.
Right, so if
Those
you wanna
aren't
talk
needs, right?
sexually.
Those sexually. There's yes
Right.
no.
Yes, no, maybe
Um,
lists, you can do it.
yeah.
You can also do it with anytime you go to the Cheesecake Factory. That is just a
Yeah, it's just a great big
food-based yes, no, maybe list that goes on for pages. Yeah, but,
and
I mean, we are offered the opportunity to I identify our wants all the time.
and once we do, um, the having the vocabulary to communicate them is a really important next step.
So, let me add that, there is an element of challenge happening inside. Like, I feel myself feeling challenged. Like, how do I help everyone listening understand that this isn't just about sex?
Hmm.
Sex is a sex is a place where I see it happen all the time. I see the layers of shame. It's like a croissant of shame, right? Like we layer that butter
Hmm.
in, and it's just everywhere. But
Oh.
there's
Oh.
another there would be like a whole other conversation if we were talking about the needs, wants, and likes, and we took sex out of it.
Yeah.
I feel like there would be this other layer of, yeah, but in a relationship, my needs are just supposed to be met.
Ah.
There's a
Okay.
level of
Hmm.
like, who's responsible exactly for meeting my needs? And we talk a lot about being an active negotiation, like, which means I need to, yes, identify what my needs, wants, where my boundaries are, what my limits are, what my bottom line requirements are. Um, the homework assignment, the primary one is for you to do your identification
Hmm.
and learn, yes, how to communicate about that. And then there's another layer of like, oh, I also have to figure out who's responsible for this, because if I'm responsible for meeting my needs, but my needs are relational.
Mm, yeah.
Well, if my need is relational, like I have a need to experience a trusting relationship, like to experience being able to trust someone, being able to trust them to show up when they say they will, do what they say they'll do, and to make amends or and hold themselves accountable when they don't. And that's not about sex, though it will impact our sex life and can show up in sex. But that need, I can't meet it myself. It is literally it
Because
happens in the relating between
it happens
us.
between, yeah.
And so whose responsibility is it to meet that need?
Hmm.
Because also someone else can't meet that need for me. And this is where the phrase, I want someone to make me feel, like I want them to make me feel safe. I want them to make me feel like I can trust them. And it's like it's a tricky, nuanced idea here
Yep.
to say, how do I make you feel that? And it's because it's not you and it's not me. It's us. We have to create this in our little micro community here. And I can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. It happens in the space between us, which makes sense. But I think also gets people into trouble because in any given moment, I can then push off the responsibility and be like, you're not meeting my needs. Or I can take too much responsibility and be like, see, my needs are too much. It's like I can't communicate them. Or you might find yourself now in a story in your head, like, yeah, see, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to
Yeah,
have the
yep,
sexual interaction with you because
yeah,
I'm not able to communicate it the way like
yeah.
so it's not like a cut and dry how do I get my needs met? It's gonna be an ongoing, um, this, like, unfolding of myself and showing myself to you and having you learn how to read who I am and be willing to participate in that
Right, so this is that
and vice
dynamic
versa.
dance of a relationship where, um, you're not you're not, you're not telling me this is how things need to be. That's like a different set of things. This is how do we negotiate and work through to a place where we're getting w what we want out of the relationship, and it
How
occur
are we co-creating the
how do we
relationship that we
co-create?
actually want?
And, so so what do you tell people? What if someone or somebody comes to you, somebody's comes to you and they're like, "Okay, so in this relationship, I think I have a sense of what I want. What do I do now?" Like, "Okay, great." So and we've even talked together like the people in this relationship, like we think we have an idea of what we're looking for. What's the next step?
Well, the first thing that you said, I think, is actually really important that in the context of that relationship, because I'm not
Okay.
sure we should ever take needs and wants and likes out of context,
Mm,
right? So, in the context of this relationship, and context includes time. So, in this context, in this phase, we think we have some ideas. Well, I think at that point we're entering into some really profound discussions. Like, what kind of relationship is this? What is the purpose of this relationship? And one of
ooh,
I love that question.
that's a great
I
question.
assign it pretty early, when people are working with me privately, we talk about what is the purpose of relationship for you as an individual, and then for each relationship that you have, what is the purpose of this relationship? And that
Mhm.
relationship might be between you and one other person, but it might also be, I mean, like our family has a collective relationship also, right? And there's a whole bunch of us here and we co create that. And figuring out what the purpose of the relationship is can help us understand how we're even going to negotiate for all these various needs, all these various that maybe contradictory at times. They may actually be at odds. So if
Yeah.
I know what the overall purpose, that can help. But, earlier I mentioned attachment needs. And One of the things I see happening right now is a dialogue around attachment needs, th that seems to be missing a piece of the a really important piece of the puzzle. We're gonna do another episode on attachment, but right now, I think it's worth saying that we really need to consent to be in a in a relationship, and if we see people as need fulfilling,
That's where I was getting. Yeah, okay,
if their
so
purpose is to fulfill my
yeah.
needs, my attachment needs, have they actually consented to that?
Mhm.
And
Right.
I wanna actually I'll table most of that discussion because I think it's an important piece of the puzzle, and I wanna get into all about attachment theory and my thoughts on it, but are you in an attachment-based relationship? Because if you're talking about meeting attachment needs with someone who is not available to meet attachment needs, then you may be living in kind of a fantasy of the relationship. And that's tricky because we can't always walk away from the relationships that we're in as cleanly and easily as we would like. But if but frequently I see people not having actually negotiated for what this relationship is for and whether we're actually going to be meeting. Like, just because I have a need doesn't mean you're obligated to meet it. So if
Yeah.
I have a need to feel safe, I mean, it's let's drill down into that. So, yes, I would like to feel safe around you. So I was dating somebody last summer who our first several dates were great. I felt very safe around them. Very safe. I was super excited, in fact, because I felt very, very safe. And then we had a particular date where there was a consent violation. And it snapped me into focus of like, oh, right, we haven't actually negotiated about what it means to be safe for each other. Like, we
Mhm.
had had safer sex conversations, we had had, kink conversations, and we had had some relational boundaries, like availability conversations, and still that was not enough. So we'd had all of those conversations. It was still not enough for me to really come face to face with the fact that this person was not available to meet my need for safety, because the consent violation was actually handled pretty well. Like, yep, like, okay, there was like a half step over a line. I called him on it. He pulled himself together like, "Oh, okay, wait." But the ability to repair afterward is what would have really created safety in the relationship.
Mhm.
So in the context of that sexual scenario, safety was created, and I felt fine enough for that, but it wasn't enough to meet my overall need for how I relate to someone in a a full-on relationship. And then I realized, "Oh, this person probably wasn't available for that, but didn't know to tell me."
But didn't know to tell you. And all right, so what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you you go into a relationship with your own personal needs, wants, likes, etc. And those can inform like your bottom line requirements for sure, because those are about you,
Yeah,
right? And then when with that, cleared up as best as possible, you talk about them, you share them. Those are things, those bottom line requirements are things you share. You don't really negotiate about them. But
yeah,
then there's the relational needs, wants, and desires. Okay, so we're what are we doing together here? Now we start a negotiation because there's give and take and a reconfiguration to see how much we can each get and give to each other. But that
right.
requires the conversation and the vocabulary and shared vocabulary, which now, if you're starting a new relationship, you have a whole other thing
Well,
of,
actually, at any point, you have a whole thing to we
well,
have
that
to keep creating
keep
shared
creating
meaning,
shared. Yeah.
especially if we're shifting paradigms. We have to
Yeah. That's a
continually
good point.
create shared
Yeah.
meaning. What does it mean to be special to someone? What does it mean to be valued?
Yeah.
We might
Good.
have to upgrade our whole idea of what it means to be special if we're shifting away from exclusivity as being the way we show someone they're
Oh,
special
yeah. So,
into, oh, how will I make them feel special? How will I help them feel special? How will I, oh,
yeah, what are the
how?
verbs I use? I'm
Yeah.
confused. I've been in those conversations like I will make help I don't know what to say here. I've
Okay.
I've run out of the words, but but you do have to start somewhere. So you start having the conversation, and then you talk about the conversation if you need to say I don't want to I don't want to talk about how you will make me feel this thing. Let's change that. So
Well,
part of the negotiation.
right. So in a negotiation, we're going to use words. Words are
Yeah.
imperfect.
Yeah.
And this is actually why I also ask people to actually write stuff down. And I get
Mm,
so much pushback about writing stuff down. But what I learned while I went to school, like I studied psychology for 13 years straight in graduate school. And um, the thing I learned that was not about psychology at all, but it's super important to my life is writing is thinking. Writing is
mm,
thinking. So as I write things down, I'm actually thinking through what are my needs? How do I articulate those needs? And how do I make them legible to myself first so that I can communicate them? And then I think the hardest part for me is how do I receive a no from someone? Because, like I said earlier, just because I have a need doesn't mean someone is obligated
right.
to fulfill it.
Yeah.
So you did not have a need for a blowjob. I believe you had a need for connection, closeness, and sexual gratification. I believe those were your needs. And I'm going to put sexual gratification on there because I actually think it's completely reasonable to say this is a need for me. I have this as a need. Okay. You I wasn't obligated to fulfill
Hmm.
those needs, but the negotiation required us to come up with language that would allow you to ask me for what you wanted, allow me to understand what you wanted, and for us to both be able to state and receive a graceful, "No, I'm not available for that.
Hmm.
No, I don't have that for you." Or, "Yes, I have something similar. Yes, yes, and I would shift it. I need to do it this way or give you this instead." And so we can make it, kind of funny and adorable talking about blowjobs, but when we're talking about, like, creating safety with each
Yep.
other, feeling attuned to each other emotionally, being able to trust one another, um, the same exact skills apply.
Yeah.
And this is not it's I just don't think it's very easy. I think that we're trying to get 2 individual psyches and centers of consciousness to align and co-create meaning
Hmm.
that, will allow us to yeah, literally do the thing that we call living a life
Yeah.
and not just sleepwalking through it. So if
And it
this all sounds hard, yeah, I think it is hard in that it's quite a bit of effort.
well, yeah, and there's yeah, so me and you, and we talk about these things, and we negotiate, we talk, and we imagine, and we write, and that's just the two of us. Now bring in a third or a fourth. We still have to deal with our particular dyad as I would for anybody else, because they're
And
for
then they all
whatever
start
for whatever group you have, yeah, but there'll be me and you, and me and him, and then you and him, and then the three of us together. So,
even if we're not all relating,
oh
there
yeah.
is
Hmm.
still the dynamic of like, okay, but we all interact with each other's systems.
I mean,
It
this is
reminds me
we.
of that game we would play with the kids where we'd toss a ball of yarn around and
Yep.
everybody be left
Yeah.
holding the yarn and like, okay,
Now
any just
untie.
yeah, you move your right arm. One of you move one right arm. Oh, a whole bunch of us felt it.
Yeah.
We're all going to feel this stuff, and that's something I see there a fair number of people, and I saw you do this, want to make the whole system simpler
Hmm.
by not talking about
Oh
needs
yeah.
and wants and
Yeah.
likes rather
Yep.
than and I I don't think I'm wrong here. I think you actually imagined you could just not have them. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like you were
No,
saying,
that's
"Oh, I'm just not
accurate.
gonna tell you." Like,
Yeah.
"No, no, I'll just stuff them down." And
Yeah.
then
And
they
I
won't
had.
cause a problem. We'll simplify the system because you had equated simple with good to the in that
Yeah.
container, and I see people do that all the time, and then sometimes, and somebody just said this in cohort last week, they said, "I'm awake.
Yeah.
I'm awake. I'm in my late 50s and I'm oh,
Mhm.
I'm awake now." It's there is no timeline for this. I mean, you were doing this work in your mid 40s, you were just starting to.
Yeah. And that is the same language I use too, by the way. I felt like I was waking up.
So waking
So,
up to your
yeah.
own needs,
Yeah.
waking up to being able to articulate them, waking up to being able to co-create a context where we can help
Yeah.
you get those needs met, and flip all that because there's more than one person in every relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in my life that I do that is more meaningful to me though than
Well,
that. And that's
I
true
agree.
in every relationship that I have, the relationships that I have with my children, the relationships that I had with my now gone parents, I like my friendships. And not everybody's available for the kind of relating that goes this deep. So I remember trying to negotiate about getting needs met with my father, and he just wouldn't. He just stopped being available for those conversations like 12 years before I needed him to. And it was really hard. And I had a friend who I specifically asked um, to work on our attachment based relationship because she was in my will. It was a whole thing. And the answer was no. And so learning to receive the no gracefully and to actually believe the person.
Yeah.
If someone's not willing to be in the negotiating, and negotiating isn't just about yes or no, but about how.
Yep.
How do we do this together?
Which, and this goes back to what you said about just because you have a need, it puts no obligation on anyone to meet it.
So I'm a
So,
big fan of requests are welcome,
mhm.
and we got to be gentle about what we expect to have happen.
So we've talked about a lot of different things. Got really out of the details and the weeds
Yeah, we were in the weeds on this one.
of what it is to understand and work with our needs, wants, desires, likes in the context of a relationship. And the through line through all of it is the talking, the communication. Um, the alternative is manipulation, is trying to coerce and manipulate into getting needs met from people that may or may not be present for it.
And a lot of people don't love this, but I mean that's
Yeah.
what people pleasing is.
Yep.
I mean, you never looked like a
Oof.
coercive person.
Oh, oh.
You looked like a kind, generous, caring person who was people pleasing to get me to do things the
Yeah.
way that
Yeah.
made you feel a certain way. Yeah.
I have
Such a
feelings of my particular kind of people pleasing because it's that's a phrase that I picked up, but in fact, what it was people manipulating. That's what I did. I wasn't actually trying to please people. I was trying to get them to do what I wanted, and that might have looked like being nice to me or being friendly to me, but I wasn't just asking. I was trying to manipulate. But and this is what I have learned is, okay, so instead of doing that, I would like to be talking to people and saying, "This is what I like. What do you like? What do you need? How are we going to do this? Do you want to do this?"
Can I just say that it makes perfect sense to me that you would learn to manipulate without talking.
Oh,
It was
thank
just
you.
it was just a strategy.
Mhm.
It was an unhelpful strategy,
Mhm.
but it makes perfect sense to me that given all the stuff that I know about how you grew up, and you had a happy childhood,
Oh yeah.
but given like the way talking didn't
Yeah, I mean,
happen,
just broad
and
strokes. I had a happy childhood in a house where people hardly ever talked about anything of any of relationships, not at all, and beyond that, not stuff of any particular import. So yeah, I just learned that the strategy was you don't talk about it.
and you were a youngest child. and then your dad was sick, and so there were other things
Stuff
going
happened.
on, and stuff
And
happened, and, like, I can understand why you would have learned to suppress as
yeah.
many needs as you
Mhm.
could, and then to quietly you could urge her.
Urge, yes.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
LA story here.
Yeah,
Certainly, you
you
could
could urge her
urge
the
her,
chicken.
and I like, it always felt to me very obvious that you were coming from a place of not knowing,
Yeah.
not knowing how to do it any other way because you never did it unkindly. You just were terribly unkind. No.
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
like, it
No,
was
and
just
I
it
don't
wasn't kind. It was it but it like, you were so nice, and you were so gentle,
yeah,
and you never I know that you had no bad intention, but the impact
the impact was
was
not
negative,
always positive from a
and
relational point of view.
and it
And
didn't get you what you
oh,
wanted.
no, no, that's the
Like,
thing.
no,
So
no, like, stay with that for a second
no, I
because
was, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
like so in that all that manipulation, you said a bunch of times early on in this conversation that that sounds like a lot of work for you. Yeah, wasn't it a shit ton of work for you? Like to constantly be trying to
Oh my god.
urge
Oh,
and
yeah.
like to get like let me just see if I can make it and
You
all and not
you mentioned that I had made a virtue of simplicity. I'd had like, that's a goal. It is not simple to do that, to be, like, trying to corral people into no, that's not simple.
yeah, so the proverbial
No, it was
swan paddling
yeah,
like mad
paddling like mad. No,
underneath.
it was a strategy that I learned and never reviewed to find out if it was actually working for me or the people around me.
And
So, yeah, I don't vilify myself for all the manipulation. I look at it and it's like, that was a strategy. Then
mhm,
I like you, I can see where it came from, but, it stopped working. So it must have served a purpose because I learned it. But then the context changed
yeah,
and it didn't work in those contexts. And it certainly didn't work in the context of my relationship with you. And it did not work for my relationship with my children.
right.
So yeah, and the communication is how I have gotten. Well, I have found that the direct communication has been a far more effective strategy, both for getting my needs met and for relating to other people without causing harm.
Well, yeah, because it you're actually engaging
Mhm.
in consensual
Right.
relating then
Yeah.
and non-manipulative. And I give you a lot of credit for being able to name it now. And I just want to say it's not like just because I was talking all the time, it's not like I wasn't also manipulating you. There were all these things that I didn't know how to talk about. We could do a whole episode on how the like, all the complication and confusion around talking about money, because that was the big
Mhm.
thing that I struggled to
Uh-huh.
talk about. So, we can flip this dialogue around on another episode and talk about how even though I looked like I was straight shooting and I was doing all the things, where I was caught by my complex, I was equally manipulative and equally destructive to our actual being in a consensual relationship. Um, it's just that I think stories about blowjobs are more fun.
They are. They certainly are. I have one more self-centered thing to say, which is that you mentioned about, like, flipping this so that we talked about, your strategies. But that doesn't feel like flipping to me, actually, because when manipulation, people pleasing, whatever you wanna call it, was my core strategy, it would absolutely feel like flipping. It would feel like, well, we've just been, I don't know, like attacking me or no, this is the strategy of communication. I don't feel harmed by this. This is the thing that I prefer to do now, which is to actually talk about the things that really happened. And so if you want in on that from your side, cool, but there's nothing being flipped. This is just the conversation we're having.
Fair would be so proud of you.
Wouldn't he though?
Yeah,
I like
he
to
would.
think so.
I no, I really think so. I can't imagine the version of you, not just from 15 years ago, but even from 5 years
Yeah.
ago, being able to sit um I in the potential for shame that you could
The
feel
the
from so many
potential.
different
Mhm.
directions
Right.
and being centered in that conversation that way, and you're just being you. Your nose isn't even red. You're not
No,
even you're
no, I'm
you don't even
not.
have the shame sweats from here.
Nope, nothing. I Because when I feel shame, instantly the whole room goes up like 10 degrees. I just
Yeah,
heat the place.
that's real rough.
Nope, that's not what's going on. Because I 100% believe this, and this is like a throwback to earlier seasons when I would sign off every episode with "keep talking to each other," and I mean it. That's 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 the technology that has allowed you and I, and me, and pretty much everybody that I've related to actually relate and not just do this separate dance with like a wall between us.
Mm, I don't like that dance either.
I don't like that.
Love you. This was great.
This
Thank
is
you.
great.
We talk to you all the time. It is absolutely imperative to me that we get to hear from you as well.
Yes, please.
So, we'd love to invite you to join us. Join Ken and I. We're holding monthly Ask Me Anythings. You can show up. Bring your questions from podcast episodes, from your relationships. Bring questions about non monogamy, about individuation, about relationship skills. We would love to share space with you. We're hosting these AMAs free of charge for our podcast listeners. You are the Playing with Fire community, and it matters a ton to us that we connect with you directly. So
Oh,
go,
I would so love to hear your questions, and oh, it'd be so awesome.
yeah. Go to joliehamilton.com/AMA and you'll find a way to sign up real quick and get an invitation to join us in a small group where we're going to get together and talk about all things non monogamy, individuation, and relationships.